The proceeding will start shortly.
Order. I call Nick Fletcher to move the motion.
Thank you, Chair, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship today. Let me also take this opportunity to thank the Backbench Committee for granting me the time in this great hall. I also welcome the Minister from the Department of Levelling Up, Housing and Communities to this debate on Easter, Christian culture and heritage. Easter is one of the two most important dates in the Christian calendar, and one I hope we will all be celebrating next weekend. The cross is symbolic of what Christ did for us on Good Friday and is wrapped up in the most famous verse of the Bible, John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. We then celebrate the resurrection of Christ on Easter Sunday, giving us not just a God, but a living God to believe in, to worship, to help us and to make us right with him, with the promise of eternal life. What a wonderful gift. With regards to heritage, well, I spoke much of this in my previous speeches on Christianity, but let me just say, much of our heritage is woven within our historic Christian past and is therefore extremely important, not just to this place, but to our nation as a whole. But it is the Christian culture part of the debate's title that I would like to spend my time on today. As we know, much rhetoric is spent on culture wars, at least in this place. This, in my understanding, has reference to what people believe in. As a Christian, I am told through Scripture to love everyone, and I try. But although I try, I often fail, and can therefore understand the concerns of others when they see beliefs and practices that are not the so-called British way. Some may not believe in progressive ideologies. I understand that. Some may believe that those who joined us from other nations should embrace our British way of life. I understand that too. But all this got me thinking, what exactly is our culture? What is our British way of life? So like most people these days, when I don't know an answer or I'm unsure of a definition, I Google it. So I did. And this is what it said. The culture of the United Kingdom is influenced by its combined nation's history, its historically Christian religious life, its interaction with the cultures of Europe and the individual cultures of England, Wales and Scotland, and the impact of the British Empire. A glaring omission there. What about Northern Ireland? Maybe the honourable member from Strangford can take this up with Google. It is important. But there we have it, according to Google. There are 3 words in there which I believe to be very important, but I will come back to them. I scrolled down a little further on the search engine and found numerous sites all listing their top 10 ideas of things that make our British culture. These are some of the things that apparently make us British. The royal family, our cuisine, the English breakfast, our love of a curry and fish and chips, how we like to queue, the pub, our humour, mainly sarcasm and banter, a cup of tea, sport, the BBC. The list goes on. And then I thought of a scene in the film Love Actually. There are a few scenes in there I don't like. I won't go into those quite now. But who can forget the one in number 10? No, not the singing and dancing Prime Minister. Do we think our Prime Minister sings and dances in there when he's on his own? If I'm ever Prime Minister, I can assure you the House, I will. No, I'm not after your job, sir, if you're listening. I hope you are. The scene I mean is the one where Hugh Grant, who plays the Prime Minister, tells the US President what he thinks. He says, "We may be a small country, but we're a great one too. The country of Shakespeare, Churchill, the Beatles, Sean Connery, Harry Potter, David Beckham's right foot, David Beckham's left foot, come to that." The first time I saw this, I have to admit, it brought a lump to my throat. I felt genuinely proud to be British. And as good as all these things are, and I must admit some of them are truly wonderful, one thing that binds most of them together was that they are ways that we enjoy ourselves. Whether it's reading the sonnets, "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" Not really me. Watching our favourite team or player, eating our favourite food, or just simply having a laugh down the pub. Definitely me. But are they really our culture? I'm not so sure. Doesn't everyone enjoy entertainment of some kind the world round? No, I think our culture goes back to those three words I spoke about earlier: Christian religious life. Now, I have mentioned the royal family. Our king is supreme governor of the Church of England, the state church, so he is extremely important to our Christian religious life. And I also mentioned Sir Winston Churchill, who did so much to defend and preserve our way of life, as have our armed forces over the centuries. But what is our culture? I believe it's not quite the Christian religious life, more our Christian way of life. The Christian way of life that has enabled us to live in freedom in this wonderful country. And trust me, it is a wonderful country. But it's even more than this, much more. I believe it's about a life with Jesus and what that life offers. Not just to the individual, but to society as a whole. Sadly, I believe when mankind removes God from the equation, then mankind will resort to its base nature. Man's base nature is not what we think it should be. Trust me, it's not good. Watching two infants play, we can often see them snatched and not want to share. We must therefore at least admit that we are all born at least a little selfish, if nothing else, which is the start. The start of a life that can often lead to things going drastically wrong without correction. If the teachings of the Christian way of life are slowly eroded, which I believe they have been, then I'm afraid each generation will fall further away from our God. Life can and will definitely get worse for all.
Will my honourable friend give way?
I
I congratulate my honourable friend on getting this debate, and he talks about culture and changing generations. Would he agree that the group of people that we met yesterday were Christian creators, I think them call themselves, who broadcast their Christian views on TikTok, are very different to what I think of as my form of worship, but they're getting the message across. Isn't that an example of how Christianity will continue through the generations?
I thank the honourable member for his contribution, and he's right. Yes, we met a wonderful group of Christian creators on TikTok yesterday, and there was fantastic young people all spreading the word of the Lord through social media, and it was a joy. It really was a joy to see fantastic young people. Our need for something to believe in. I will obviously, yes, of course.
Thank you. I'm struck with this reflection on a Christian way of life. And in the UK, we're very fortunate to have had giants in our history, people like Josiah Wedgwood, Lord Shaftesbury, William Wilberforce, who have improved the lives of thousands, millions potentially, the poor, those who've been oppressed and slaves. Does he agree with me that these were all individuals who claimed a strong Christian faith as a motivating factor? Does he agree with me then that as a country we're freer, we're more equal, we're better off for the influence of those Christian figures in our history?
I thank the honourable member for his contribution, and I agree with every single word of it. As I said, it's not just about society's relationship with Christianity, it's the individual's relationship with Christ, which gives them the strength to do wonderful things for society as a whole. And he mentioned three wonderful people who were all devout Christians. Our need for something to believe in is always present, and if it isn't in the Christian teachings and God, then what is it in? If we have no faith or turn our back on faith, we will search for something to fill the void. Often we start looking inwards. We start to lust after things that are not good for us. Like a drug, we may get a quick hit of happiness, but it's soon gone. We may ask, where's the proof? Well, here's the proof. After all the ways to entertain ourselves and spend our time, how many people do we have struggling with their mental health in the UK? All those wonderful things Google thinks makes us British and that I have spoken about, yet we have so many unhappy people. So why? I am afraid the Bible is clear. It tells us that if we turn our back on God, he will give us up to our natural state. We become filled with all kinds of wickedness, evil, greed. We gossip and speak badly of one another. We become proud and boastful, and when young, we disobey our parents. It teaches us that we lose our conscience and do not keep our promises. We show no kindness or pity for others and become unforgiving souls. No, if we turn our back on God, he will give us up. And I think in many places in society, he may already have. So how did this happen? I remember it was said by many that anyone who believed in Christ was a Bible basher, a God botherer. Many laughed. I was called one myself. Then Christians were told, it's okay, you believe, but don't ram it down my throat. So guess what? It happened. In many quarters, the church listened. The Christians listened. I listened too. Many stopped talking about God for fear of being accused of ramming it down other people's throats. Not that other people seemed concerned about sharing their beliefs. What's worse is that those that didn't want a faith also didn't appear to want others to have a faith either. Christians ridiculed on the big stage across the country. And now many believers have been too quiet for too long. In the recent 2021 census, for the first time in England and Wales, less than half the population described themselves as Christian. 37.2% of people said they had no religion. Is there a connection with so much unhappiness? So many young and old dealing with mental health issues. So many searching for hope, often through sources that are not healthy in any manner of the word. With figures on the decline, I'm sure many vicars may feel they are just going through the motions, maybe even feeling lost in their work, preaching to empty pews. And so we have many denominations even trying to become progressive, to try and become relevant to fill those empty seats, many moving further away from God's word. The meaning of Scripture is often misinterpreted to reflect current trends instead of holding firm and letting the Bible be the guide for our people to look to. And so it appears the loudest voices continue to win. I am often told in this job, let's look at the outcome. It's a fair point. So let's. The outcome, a vacuum. A vacuum created that was always going to have to be filled. The question is, with what? I believe, firstly, we've filled it with 7-day-a-week shopping, 24-hour TV, the internet, the iPhone, and for those that have really lost their way, a whole host of illegal activities. Secondly, it has been filled with contested views and so-called progressive ideologies that not only vilify our past, but demand reparations. Ideologies that confuse our present through indoctrination of our children with gender questioning, and climate change zealots that are not pragmatic with their views but only seem intent on terrifying people about our world's future, when really we should be proud of our nation's history, content in our present, and being optimistic of our future, especially when we have a faith grounded in Jesus Christ. And thirdly, something not necessarily filling a vacuum, but taking its place in our society, are the beliefs of other people who have made Britain their home, our next-door neighbours, their way of life growing. Not through force. Most like us are kind people. No, their faith and culture growing because they have something to believe in. And maybe because they see nothing else. Many visitors must often be amazed at the apathy many of us have for our own culture. We want people to embrace it, but have we let it go? And have we let it go because we have let God go? If we continue on this trajectory or even fuel it with even more secular views, we will no doubt see the swift end of what many believe was British culture. And when I Google British culture, it may instead speak of multiculturalism, which many will say is good, but I am sure it will also be even more of a mix of nonsense that is grounded in ways to entertain ourselves and those contested progressive ideologies. But it doesn't have to be this way. The department which has responsibility for communities has a role to play here. It has an interest in helping to protect our history. The government has a duty to help protect our young people from the nonsense they see on their phones that create their confusion. The government has done much with the online safety bill, but can and should do more. A department which has responsibility for communities can surely use its budget to help Christian churches and community groups, not stop them receiving money because of tick-box exercises that don't match with a secular belief. It can bring the schools and the churches and the community together through the things that make us British. Our king, a cup of tea, a game of cricket, a beer in the pub, David Beckham's left foot. I'm sure there must be a way the department can do much more to promote faith and family and our Christian heritage values and the way of life. Encourage the country's people.
I really do commend my honourable friend on promoting this magnificent debate, so well timed in advance of Easter. I'm sure he would agree with me when I say that our entire heritage, the foundations of our laws, our customs, our conventions, our entire British way of life is founded on the Christian heritage of these islands. And whilst we cherish the principle of freedom of religion for all and respect for people of no faith and of other faiths, it is nevertheless the case that it is the Christian foundations that have allowed a free society to develop, whereby anyone can choose the life they lead. And therefore we should defend that Christian heritage, because if we undermine it, we undermine the entire free society that so many generations have built.
I thank my honourable friend for his contribution. And he said in 30 seconds what's taken me 18 minutes, or will take me 18 minutes to say so far. So I thank him for his contribution, and he's completely right. I'm sure there must be the way the department can do much more to promote faith and family and our Christian heritage, values and way of life. Encourage the country's people to look out for each other instead of inwards on oneself. Embrace a culture of forgiveness and love for all our neighbours. Lead the nation to speak proudly of its past. And as the formidable Douglas Murray once said, urge a people to have, I quote, an attitude of gratitude. A nation that knows the boundaries of right and wrong, sets them in stone so we all know where we are. Where no means no, not maybe, especially when speaking to and guiding our young. A nation where opportunity is available to all for the better of all. I want a nation's people that believes what C.S. Lewis once stated. Aim at heaven and you will get the earth thrown in. Aim at the earth and you will get neither. Can we not do all this while letting those who have called our shores home enjoy their culture too? I think we can, and I think we should. And if our Christian culture in faith and family shines like the beacon of hope that it should, then the ideologies and desires that can often be negative will be starved of oxygen, and they will each fall one by one. And the new people we welcome will see our culture and maybe even want to be a part of it too.
I endorse what was said by my honourable friend from Romford in congratulating my honourable friend in bringing this debate to the House. And he knows, and he's articulating, that the most corrosive force in our country now is a nihilism and the related moral relativism that's associated with it. You hear people now, Madam Chairman, speak of not truth, but their truth. as though truth could be negotiated. But truth cannot be negotiated. It is an absolute, and it's embodied in the message of Christianity.
I thank my honourable man for his contribution there, and I know he believes, as I do, that the truth is in the Bible and is in the name of Jesus Christ. And if the Christian culture in faith and family shines like the beacon of hope that it should, then the ideologies and the desires that can often be negative will be starved of oxygen. And the new people we welcome will see our culture and maybe want to be a part of it. I know this sounds utopian, but we are told that faith can move mountains, and we must admit we have a mountain to move. But my faith only grows stronger day by day, Minister. And when I look for the good in people, not for the bad in everyone I meet, it gets stronger too. Minister, I know I am a sinner. I have before turned my back on God. But 15 years ago, I gave my life to Jesus forever. I know he is with me now. I know at Easter, Jesus died on a cross for me. Yes, for me, and for you. And through my repentance and my belief in him, I am saved. And although that fills me with great joy, and it does, I want all the world to know that Jesus loves them too. I want this nation to fix their eyes on heaven and not on themselves or their earthly desires. Believe in a living God, not fashionable ideologies. Minister, this Easter, will our government promote celebrating what Christ did for us on the cross on Good Friday and his resurrection on Easter Sunday? Will she encourage the nation to go to church and embrace our Christian culture? Because if the people do, and if they search and listen, they will find God too. He is waiting with open arms. The angels are ready to sing for every sinner who repents and believes in our Lord. And if the government gets this right, then we will all instinctively know what our British culture is. God will not turn his back on us. He will hold us and love us, and the culture wars will be no more. Can the minister imagine being part of the government which eradicated the culture wars? Got the country to be proud of its past, content with its present, and sure of its future in Christ? Now there is a challenge, and if she and the government wish to take it, I'm right behind them, and so are millions of Christians across this land. Happy Easter. God bless us all, and God bless our country.
The question is that this House has considered Easter, Christian culture and heritage. So everyone who's wishing to speak is bobbing, is that right? Because then we can do the maths. Actually, we've got 3 hours. So anyway, first of all, in that case, I call Sir Edward Lee.
Well, of course, I've got to start by congratulating the wonderful Member of Parliament for Don Valley, who has proved himself in the short time he's been in the House a superb Member of Parliament, really caring, really embedded in his community in Doncaster. And really, I've got to salute his courage for bringing this debate at all. I think this is the third debate that he's had of this nature. And I'm not aware, of the many years I've been in the House, that anybody else has had the courage, actually, to promote a debate like this. I think politicians are naturally averse to talking about their faith. I suppose they think that if they talk about their faith, they may be putting themselves on some kind of pedestal, and being, of course, sinners, as we all are, they'll eventually be brought down and people will mock them. But I think the way that the honourable friend for Don Valley expresses himself is so humble and so forgiving and so self-deprecatory that nobody could accuse him of putting himself on a pedestal. He's simply trying to make the point, which is a very, very powerful point that too few of us have the courage to make, that Christianity really is the very heart of our nation and of its history. And so much of what has made us such a great nation and a wonderful place to live is embedded in Christianity. So many of our freedoms relate to Christianity. Now, of course, people will criticize the history of Christianity. they will criticise the way in the past that Christians treated each other or persecuted each other. We all know that. But undoubtedly, what has made this nation is the Christian faith. Now, that is not to belittle other faiths. And what I think I liked about his speech is that he is complimentary about people of all faiths. They all, and it's no accident, of course, that the great religions of the world, whether it's Islam or Judaism or Christianity, all have the same kind of moral code. So in promoting Christianity, he isn't trying to downplay the importance and the wonder of all the other religions. And of course, our forebears who made this building, and I think a lot about this because I serve on the Restoration and Renewal Board of this building, knew this. You walk around this building, and I was showing some visitors to Parliament only this morning around the robing room in the House of Lords, you see scattered all over the building is Christian iconography. If you go to the robing room, you'll see compassion on there and mercy, forgiveness, all those sort of Christian concepts. So he's very courageous. Now, I know that Alistair Campbell once said we don't do God, and most politicians, certainly politicians who want to get to the top of politics, are very wary of it. But I think it is important that just occasionally there are people of courage, like my honourable friend, who are prepared to speak up. And I think I was talking to him only yesterday. There is such a rich and different tradition in Christianity. A my honourable friend was telling me about the evangelical church he goes to in Doncaster, where there is a tremendous spirit. I mean, some people might call it happy-clappy, I wouldn't say that. But what he said to me, and this is very important, is that it is extraordinarily successful, that church. And the churches which are successful and growing are the churches which are self-confident. And as he said, the churches that are rooted firmly in the Bible. And constantly, during their services, don't necessarily talk about our secular world and how we can make it a happy place, but they root themselves in the Bible. Now, I come from a very different Christian tradition to my honourable friend. You know, I'm not an evangelical. I don't talk about Jesus in the way that he does. I'm a Catholic. But it's interesting, too, that the successful Catholic churches in this country are those which are increasingly rooted in our ancient Catholic traditions. And many, many young people are flocking to Catholic churches which are resurrecting the ancient Mass and its beauty and all that, which seem to be self-confident. And I think there is a message. I mean, I suppose I'm not a member of the Church of England. It's not really for me to offer them advice or even criticise them. But I think there is a message there for the Church of England, which is our established church. And we should be very proud that we are one of the very few countries in the world which has an established church. And we should, above all, keep the established church as established. And we should keep bishops in the House of Lords. But dare I say it, sometimes the Church of England leadership, I make no criticism of people who are working on the ground, but sometimes the Church of England leadership, they're wonderful people, I quite understand where they're coming from, feel that they have to wade in on politics, which they have a right to do, just as I have a right to wade in religion. They have a right to wade in on politics, but perhaps they need to remember that in this country, in any country, there is a tremendous yearning for spirituality. And I think one of the problems with the decline of Christianity, and we have to accept that this is now one of the most secular countries in the world, one of the problems with the decline of Christianity and faith in general is if you have a vacuum, other sort of movements step in. And the whole country becomes more difficult to govern, more unhappy. And there's undoubtedly, if you go to a place like India, and if you go around villages in India and you see, even though there are levels of unimaginable poverty, they are not necessarily less happy than we are. More happy in many ways, because they have that spiritual grounding which so many people in this country don't have. So there is, I think, in what my honourable friend says, so much of importance. Now, I don't really want to inject a negative note, but
I thank Honourable for giving way. It struck me, both in his own remarks and the remarks of the Honourable Member for Don Valley, that what's being described is something that is much bigger, something that is much more enduring than many of the concerns that many of the things that we concern with ourselves as politicians. And does he agree with me then that what seems to be coming through already in this debate is a sense that it's a dislocation from those eternal, enduring beliefs or values and holding to those that is giving us a sense perhaps of drift or a sense of lack of purpose in society today?
Yes, I think that we've got to recognise that there is this sense of drift in society and pessimism, but this debate, quite rightly, is about Easter, which is the great feast of the resurrection, the great feast of hope. So it's wonderful that my honourable friend has expressed himself in such a positive way. May I just make one point about the Church of England? I mean, like my honourable friend, I represent the most beautiful and the most wonderful county in England, namely Lincolnshire, and we have the finest medieval churches in the country. And every single village in my constituency you go to, you see these wonderful expressions of piety and faith and hope built hundreds of years ago. And I sympathise with the Church of England in having to maintain this huge structure. And my honourable friend has asked the government to do many things. I think even this wonderful minister might find it difficult to recreate this country as a faith-loving community. But one thing the government can do, I think, is to help and enable the Church of England to preserve this amazing heritage. I know in France, for instance, that all churches built before 1900 are actually funded by the state. Now, the Church of England is on its own. It's a tremendous burden. And I think the Church of England is to be commended for keeping this wonderful architectural heritage going. And may I just, again, make one gentle criticism of the Church of England. I'm very much on the side of the Save Our Parish movement in the Church of England. I'm very much on the side of the Church of England putting whatever resources it has into the parish ministry. And there is some criticism in the Church of England that the resources are being diverted away from the parishes and into the centre, and that too many people are being hired at the centre. Just one example, the Diocese of York are advertising for a racial justice education advisor. Their job specification elaborates that the role will cover unconscious bias and diversity training. The concept of, quote, unconscious bias has no evidential basis in scientific, psychological, or medical research. It is already years since the government dropped it from the civil service. The Government Equalities Office commissioned the Behavioural Insights team to summarise the evidence on unconscious bias and diversity training in 2020. Their report highlighted there's currently no evidence that this training changes behaviour in the long term or improves workplace equality in terms of representation of women, ethnic minorities, or other minority groups. It further pointed out that there is emerging evidence of unintended negative consequences from this training. Now, I know that the Minister can't answer on behalf of the Church of England, but perhaps the government has a role here. We see the Church, quangos, charities, civil society groups, and corporations adopting this training. Perhaps the government can take a lead in enlightening them, not just that it is nonsense, but that often it can even lead to the opposite of the intended result. It could be doing more to inform and enlighten church, charities, quangos, civil society groups and corporations. This is not just a nonsense, but may indeed actually lead to something perverse. Now, I mentioned just one example from the Diocese of York, but I'm sure if you search the vacancies websites of other Anglican dioceses, you would find many such cases. So I'm sorry to make that point. I don't mean to criticise the Church of England, which I think is a superb institution, and they're doing wonderful work all over the country. But there is a sort of slight tendency at the centre of the Church of England to move in this sort of direction that I've been talking about, which I don't think is central to their purpose in making us a more spiritual nation. Now, may I just, before I sit down, may I pay tribute to the late Lord Cormac. Christianity, culture and heritage, in any combination of these three, were his lifeblood. He was the founder of the All-Party Heritage Group. In the real world, he was a valiant fighter, co-founding Heritage in Danger in 1974. He was one of the central figures who prevented Hereford Cathedral selling off their magnificent Mappa Mundi in 1988 to pay for repairs. Lord Cormac was a warden at Parliament's own parish church, St Margaret's across Palace Yard. He served for a decade on the Church of England's General Synod, and of course his compassion and service were not limited to the Church of England. He was a leading campaign for Soviet Jews in the 1970s and 1980s, and he was granted an honorary doctorate by the Catholic University of America. Now, next week, on Monday, we will gather at Lincoln Cathedral to bid him farewell for the final time, and there can be no more appropriate setting for this great parliamentarian. I know myself, from my time serving for a decade on Lincoln Cathedral's council, how pressed for resources the great churches of England are. I believe it is vital that the government, whether through direct heritage funding or via agencies like the National Lottery, support our churches to protect their architectural heritage. Last year, we celebrated the 39 different projects in Catholic churches that were funded thanks to Historic England's Heritage Stimulus Fund, part of the government's Culture Recovery Fund. I was pleased to see Lord Parkinson, the Heritage Minister, there, alongside the Lord Speaker and our own Deputy Speaker. The Catholic Bishops' Conference of England and Wales produced a splendid booklet called Living Stones, a celebration of achievement detailing all the works completed thanks to this funding. The important thing to remember about these buildings, whether they're great cathedrals or the tiniest gospel hall, is not stones, bricks and mortar. As the first epistle of Peter tells us, we Christians are to be living stones upon which a spiritual house is built. What we have to offer this country is not just an architectural heritage or a service of care and relief to the poor. It is the resurrection and the faith built upon it that is the reason for all this, and without it, our history and our heritage is meaningless.
Dr. Huck, may I thank you for calling me to speak in this significant debate here in Westminster Hall this afternoon. I would like to again commend my honourable friend, the member for Don Valley, for calling this debate as we approach the Easter tide period. May I also say what a privilege it is to follow my honourable friend, the member for Gainsborough, who has, throughout his many years in this House, has demonstrated clear Christian leadership in so many areas of life, British life, and I thank him for the service he's given to this House and to our country, and always standing up for the Christian heritage of the United Kingdom. And it is that which I want to refer to today, because the title of this debate is Easter, Christian Culture and Heritage. We can talk about religion, and we have done, and so we should. And the honourable member has rightly made that the focus of his speech today. But the cultural side of this is also vitally important, because not everybody in these islands consider themselves to be Christian. Many have no faith. Many have different faiths. Many are unsure as to where they stand. However, what most people, I believe, stand strongly for is the upholding of the heritage that goes with the Christian faith. The culture, our customs, our way of life, our laws, which are founded on Christian teachings, our constitution, our monarchy, our flag, the great national symbols of this nation, all, as my right honourable friend, the member for Gainsborough, mentioned, have Christian symbols embedded within them. One only needs to look at the crown, Madam Chairman, the crown that His Majesty wears, the coronation only a year ago. On the top of that crown is a cross. It is there for a purpose, because it signifies the foundations of our society. We have an established church, and I'm glad we do, because by having the Church of England as our established church, it actually protects all other religions and denominations to worship freely, a free society, without being persecuted, without being belittled or sidelined or attacked in any way. We have a society that freedom of religion is cherished and protected under a rule of law, and by having an established church, it prevents sectarianism. It prevents different religions vying for power or vying for domination, because everyone accepts that our king is the head of the church and that the Christian faith has made the foundations of our society. So everybody can worship freely under that framework. And that is why I strongly support the Church of England as a religious leadership of this country, but also as part of the culture of our nation. It's right, I believe, that in schools, young people are able to sing hymns. It's right that at the start of a meal, we say grace. That's part of our heritage as well. And it's right that we celebrate Easter, Christmas, Whitsun, and all the magnificent religious holidays that we officially recognise in this country. And long may that remain so. I would be deeply unhappy if there were ever a question that days like Good Friday or Christmas Day or Whitsun were not formally recognised as public holidays. Good Friday should be a day where people reflect, where there is a solemn feeling and a view that we should consider why we are celebrating Easter and why we are sad on Good Friday itself, the day that Jesus was crucified. I give way to my honourable friend.
I'm struck again in his remarks that describing Christianity as a source and not as an addition or a bolt-on or a replaceable extra in the culture and heritage we have in our country.
Well, my honourable friend is exactly right in what he's saying, and it brings me on to some of the points I would like to make in this debate today, because Christianity is everywhere around us. We may not be a Christian. There are people who are not Christians, but the Christian culture of British society is everywhere. And to remove that would undermine the foundations of our society. One only needs to think back in history. The Vikings themselves, they came to these islands 1,000 years ago, but it was the Christian faith that united England under the banner of King Alfred and then subsequently King Athelstan. It is St. George, Madam Chairman, who is the embodiment of England, and we will be celebrating St. George's Day on the 23rd of April, and I hope very much, as Chairman of the Royal Society of St. George Houses of Parliament branch, hosting an event here in Parliament for all members to celebrate the heritage of England. And that includes honourable friends from other parts of these islands, especially Scotland. Of course, our national anthem is a prayer itself, a prayer to God. And the de facto anthem of England is, of course, Jerusalem, not officially recognised, but it's nevertheless, most people, I think, would consider Jerusalem to be the hymn that most people sing when we celebrate England, English heritage and culture. And of course, our monarch is anointed in Westminster Abbey. And our royal motto translates to God and my right. The Bible transformed the way our civilization has operated, whether through law, governance, art, architecture, and so many other areas of life. And it has shaped the way all Britons, everybody in this country, including those with no religion, think about family, community, and morality. And it was through the lens of the Christian faith that we were the first nation on the planet to not only permanently outlaw slavery, but to enforce this ban worldwide through the West Africa Squadron. We do indeed, Madam Chairman, have a proud history based on our Christian heritage and our Christian customs, and long may they continue, but it hasn't always been quite so straightforward. And I've been a Member of Parliament now for 23 years, but in my second year as a Member of Parliament, there was almost a outrage when some local authorities were suggesting that the hot cross bun should be banned, can you believe? And I remember this happening, I think it was 2003. Political correctness, even then, and I think it's got probably worse today with these things, where anything can offend anybody, and that's dangerous because then we lose our heritage. But I remember in 2002, in fact it was, we had to have an early day motion to defend the hot cross bun. And I'm sorry my honourable friend for South Holland and the Deepings has left, but he was one of those who signed the EDM. If I may just remind the House of what that EDM said. And it said that this House was appalled at the decision by some local authorities in the United Kingdom to ban hot cross buns from schools. Believes that hot cross buns to be a splendid Easter tradition that represents the Christian heritage of Britain and encourages all schools in the United Kingdom to ignore such politically correct advice from local authorities and continue to serve the hot cross buns. I'm delighted that in the tea room only yesterday I very much enjoyed the hot cross buns that are offered to members of Parliament. But it really, I have to say to my friend, the Honourable Friend for Don Valley, that little thing only all those years ago, it simply, to me, alarmed me that so many things that are perfectly innocent and part of our culture can be undermined by people who seem to want to take away so much of what we hold dear in these islands and our ancestors, our forebears, have fought to defend over so many generations. I give way to my right honourable friend.
Very important point, and I wanted to say it earlier, but it's very important that we should defend the right of people to speak their mind freely about religion. So we should defend the right of Richard Dawkins, atheists, to attack religious people or religions in general. And we've got to also defend the right of religious people to have their space, whether it's Orthodox Jews or devout Muslims or evangelical Christians, to have them allowed to have their space. And we've got to also defend the right of people not just to attack religion or religious people in general, but also to criticize particular religions. And there is a sort of dumbing down of debate, and people are afraid increasingly to express their viewpoint. But in a vigorous democracy, there must be this freedom of expression.
My right friend is completely correct. Freedom of speech and freedom of religion go hand in hand. So it is, of course, right in a free society that anybody can criticise a religion for the teachings that it espouses, but equally so, we have the right to believe something completely different and be tolerant to one another in a free society. And that is the nature of religion. People do have different opinions, people do have different perspectives, people are raised in different ways, they come from different ancestry, people come from different heritage, different countries, and have other religions, and I defend that. And that is one of the fundamental things that make us British, that we defend freedom of religion, and we should never lose that. But not be afraid to debate these things, not be afraid to have different opinions and to criticise people because they have a different opinion. We can discuss and debate, but we must always allow opinions to be expressed. For if we lose that ability to be able to speak freely and to disagree with each other in a polite and gentlemanly way, then I'm afraid that we lose so much of what our society is about. So long may freedom of speech and freedom of religion go hand in hand together. If I may, Madam Chairman, before I conclude my remarks, I'd just like to say one or two things about my own constituency. I was christened at the Church of St Edward the Confessor, which is the most magnificent church in the centre of Romford Market. I was confirmed in that church. And every year we have magnificent Easter celebrations. On Good Friday there has been a March of Witness, which I have always attended since being the Member of Parliament. In recent times we've had open-air services with all the churches within the town centre, led by St Edward's Church, which is the main church in Romford. And in recent years on Palm Sunday, a donkey has appeared through the market square and into the church for Palm Sunday, as we have gathered for that also very significant day in the Christian calendar. And I would like to pay tribute to the Reverend Father David Simpson. He was the parish priest for the last few years. He's now moved on, and he's now working for the mission to the seafarers. So he's retired 2 weeks ago, and I'd like to pay tribute to his service to the people of Romford as Vicar of Romford, leading our church and playing such a significant role in the community. And I know honourable and right honourable friends here today will wish him well with his future career as he becomes a pastor to seafarers based in Felixstowe and carries out his mission for the seafarers of our country and indeed the whole world. Yes, of course.
He's been very generous, and I thank him for giving away a second time. But again, it seems to me that in paying tribute rightly to the institutions and to the individuals in his own constituency, doubtless something that every other member here could do as well, he's actually showing again just how much Christianity is a part of the fabric of our society, how it's steeped in these traditions and rituals, many of which we will have forgotten or will have overlooked for their familiarity, but they are there nonetheless, an inherent part of British culture and society.
Indeed, they are part of our way of life, and long may that be the case. And I think as members of Parliament, we understand how important it is in our constituencies to engage with our churches and our faith groups, of all religions, by the way, but especially those that represent the local culture and heritage of our individual constituencies. And I certainly do that in Romford, and I'm very proud to be a member of St Edward the Confessor Church and to pay tribute to the work they have done over many centuries. In fact, Her Majesty the Queen, Her late Majesty the Queen, visited the church in 2003, a year after her Golden Jubilee, and I was very honoured to meet her in Romford on that occasion. And I'd also like to pay tribute to the Church of St Alban Protomartyr and the Reverend Father Roderick Hingley, who has raised hundreds of thousands of pounds to restore the church with magnificent artwork, with Stations of the Cross, magnificent candlesticks, stained glass windows, and refurbishing the church hall and the church in general. What a magnificent leader of our community Father Hingley has been, and his extension by the Church of England to continue in post for a few more years has been most welcome. But I do worry about the divisions that are existing today in the Church of England. I want the Church of England to be strong and to uphold the Christian heritage. And of course, there are different ways of worshipping within the Church of England, but we must ensure that the Church is still there for all people and is not allowed to become a divided organisation. We must try to bring the Church of England together because it is the church that represents the state. The king is the head of the church, and that provides an incredibly important structure to retaining the Christian heritage of our nation. And so, in closing, Madam Chairman, I would like to finally say that when I became a Member of Parliament, I was proud to swear the oath of allegiance to the Queen, and I've done so ever since. At each occasion, I did so only recently to His Majesty the King. I do believe that the importance of having prayers at the start of our proceedings in the House of Commons is very important. I do believe it's vital that we retain those traditions and conventions. And I think we all have a duty to protect people of all faiths in our constituencies, but always remember that the freedom the law of this country affords us means that freedom of religion is there for everyone to cherish. And that is the nature of the United Kingdom. It is the foundation of the British Isles, of all parts of the British Isles, and long may all members of this House defend that heritage.
The SNP, Patrick Grady.
Thank you, Dr. Huck. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And I warmly congratulate the Honourable Member for Don Valley on securing the debate. It doesn't seem like it was that long since we were taking part in the debate that he led on the significance of Christmas, Christianity and communities, and perhaps that's for the simple reason that it wasn't actually that long ago. The date of Easter, as the Member for Gainsborough will well know, is calculated using a formula known as the computus, which identifies the first Sunday after the full moon that occurs on or after the spring equinox. And that means that this year Easter is almost as early as it possibly can be under that formula. So we are about as close to Christmas as we can be since that last debate, a little over 3 months or so ago. And it's not by accident that the two great feasts of the Christian calendar occur when they do. Christmas, celebrating the birth of Jesus, who Christians consider to be the light of the world, comes just after the winter solstice, when the days begin to get longer and darkness is overcome. And Easter, marking the death and resurrection of Christ, follows the spring equinox, when new life begins to bloom in nature. The date of Easter is also linked to the Jewish observation of the Passover, because the Gospel tells us that the Last Supper, crucifixion and resurrection all took place around the time of Passover observations in Jerusalem in those days. And just as the Passover commemorates the liberation of the Jewish people from slavery in Egypt, Christians mark Easter as the liberation of humanity from slavery to the trappings of this world that would separate us from the love of God. So it is a particularly holy and special time of year for those who profess the Christian faith. Indeed, it's the time of year when many Christian churches, particularly the Catholic Church, will welcome new adults who have chosen to seek baptism and confirmation into full communion of the church. And this is a time of great joy for those individuals and their families, and also for the communities and parishes which they will join. And I'm sure we want to keep all those making that journey this year in our thoughts and our prayers. Easter, of course, comes after the period of Lent, which is a time of reflection, of prayer, fasting and almsgiving, practices which are also being observed at this time by our Muslim brothers and sisters who are observing the holy month of Ramadan. And I always hold those who keep the Ramadan fast in the highest of regard, because I find swearing off certain food and drink for 6 weeks during Lent difficult enough, but to abstain entirely from any kind of nourishment, including water, during daylight hours, I think I would find incredibly difficult indeed. But the joy of Easter is not to be confined just to celebrations in church buildings and parish halls. All of these practices and observations are about more than just what happens during the particular seasons. Christians, and indeed the Muslim community and other faiths who practice similar traditions, see them as preparation for service throughout the year and indeed throughout their lives. Faithful witness is not just about words, but about deeds. And already in our communities, we can see examples of this, and we've heard examples from members who have spoken today. And I can assure the Honourable Member for Romford that I will be happy to celebrate St George's Day with him, and in particular in solidarity with friends in Catalonia who also recognise St George as their patron saint.
I do thank my honourable friend for giving that commitment to celebrating St George's Day, on one condition, that he organises a celebration for St Andrew's Day on the 30th of November. I don't think we've ever had one in Parliament. I've certainly not attended, but I'm sure we'd be delighted if there would be one for all patron saints of the British Isles.
Well, of course, there is no. He's right that each of the nations, in fact, we all know they're depicted in the central lobby. Each of the nations of the United Kingdom have a patron saint. I don't think any of the churches have designated one saint for the whole of the United Kingdom for probably quite important diplomatic and theological reasons. But if the House is sitting in November time, because who knows what might be happening towards the end of the year that would cause the House not to be sitting, or for there to have been some change in the composition of the House, then perhaps that would be something to consider. Incidentally, the SNP opposition days quite often fall around St Andrew's Day, and whether that's by accident or design, I'll leave others to consider. I also have some sympathy with what he says about hot cross buns, and I try to abstain from a hot cross bun until Good Friday itself, and then I very much enjoy them after attending the Good Friday services. However, that's about all of our different communities. And in Glasgow North, such prophetic witness is visible in the activities of many of the Christian churches and other faith-based organisations. I've spoken before about the food bank at St Gregory's Church in the Wynford, which is staffed by dedicated volunteers and gratefully receives donations not just from the parish community, but from people of all faiths and none, and businesses across Maryhill. And yet they still struggle to meet demand, particularly a proportion of that need that they're meeting comes from the refugee and asylum-seeking community in the area. People who are hungry and looking for food, those who are thirsty and looking for drink, those who are sick and need visiting, those who are strangers and need taking in. Some members will recognise that Jesus says in Matthew chapter 25 that those who carry out such works for the least of his brothers and sisters do so also to him. So I pay tribute to the work of the Maryhill Integration Network as well, who help provide access to culturally sensitive and religiously appropriate sources of food and nutrition to those who arrive in our city, sometimes with nothing but the clothes that they have on their backs. I also pay tribute to those in Glasgow North and elsewhere who are motivated by their faith to work for peace and justice around the world. I think particularly of the work of Christian Aid, of SCIAF, of Tear Fund, who very often use this time of year, Lent, Easter, and the time that follows it, to raise awareness of their campaigns for justice around the world, and particularly the impact of climate change. His Holiness Pope Francis has spoken powerfully about the impact of climate change on some of the poorest and most vulnerable people around the world, and says that a way of putting faith into action is to take action on that point. Another climate zealot, perhaps, is His Majesty King Charles, who at COP26 said, "I pray with all my heart that COP28, will be another critical turning point for genuine transformational action, unless we rapidly repair and restore nature's unique economy based on harmony and balance, which is our ultimate sustainer, our own economy and survivability will be imperilled." So I think these are important words, but the role of the monarchy and the role of Christian leadership has been mentioned many times today, and I think we should take those examples of leadership to heart. I also want to acknowledge the work of our faith schools and their contribution to our communities, and I hope I can take this opportunity in particular to congratulate the staff and pupils at St Mary's Primary School in Maryhill, who are celebrating the school's 50th anniversary this year. Their current building was opened on the 26th of February 1974, and there have been a number of events and activities in recent weeks to mark that occasion, including the pupils coming together to form a giant figure 50 in the school playground, celebratory reunions of former staff, pupils and chaplains, and an anniversary mass celebrated in the nearby Church of the Immaculate Conception by the Archbishop of Glasgow, Archbishop Nolan. And I'm sure all members will want to congratulate the school on this very happy milestone and wish them all the best for the future. Successive Scottish governments, led by successive First Ministers, have also recognised the importance of Easter celebration to the Christian community in Scotland. Last year, the new First Minister, Humza Yousaf, sent his first Easter message to those celebrating, and he did so as the first Muslim leader of a government on these islands, and while he himself was observing the Ramadan fast. And in his message, he said, "For Christians, Easter is an enormously important time of year. It's a time when family and friends come together to celebrate a story at the very heart of Christianity, a story of sacrifice, of hope, of renewal that provides inspiration to people all around the world. We see the results of that inspiration, of course, in the work of our Christian churches throughout the year. In all parts of our country, they play an exceptionally important role, offering spiritual guidance, helping those in need, and strengthening our communities. And at the same time, they also continue to provide vital support to communities across the developing world, and that contribution is one which I hugely value and admire. So I want to thank our Christian communities for the vital role they play and send my best wishes to Christians everywhere, and I want to wish all of those who are celebrating a very happy and joyous Easter." And I think it's also right to acknowledge that the Prime Minister, the first Hindu to lead a government on these islands, has regularly recognised the contribution of Christianity to our heritage and to modern society, and has also sent messages of goodwill at Easter and Christmas. And all of this, I think, recognises and demonstrates the importance of strong interfaith relationships and the importance of interreligious dialogue, which I think is why a number of members across the House, myself included, and a number of my constituents are disappointed at the UK Government's decision to end funding for the Interfaith Network. At a time when understanding and dialogue between faiths is so important, where in so many parts of the world, and even in some parts of our own country, people are using religion or belief as grounds for seeking division, it's important that resources and structures are in place to promote tolerance and respect, because as we've noted many times here in Westminster Hall, one thing that all the great religions of the world have in common is the golden rule of reciprocity, the teaching that we should do unto others as we would have them do unto ourselves. And very few of us, I think, would want to be bombing ourselves or destroying ourselves or causing any kind of trouble and hatred towards ourselves. So we should not be doing that to others. So I hope the government will carefully consider and review its decision. But all that said, Dr Huck, this time next week, Christians will enter into the three most important days of their liturgical year: the celebration of the Lord's Supper on Maundy Thursday, the commemoration of the crucifixion on Good Friday, and then the joyful celebration of the resurrection at the vigil, the Easter Vigil on Holy Saturday and on Easter Sunday itself. Such a joyful occasion, in fact, that the celebration continues in the Church's calendar for 50 full days until the Feast of Pentecost. I'm not sure whether the member for Don Valley intends to apply for a debate to mark that date in the Christian calendar. The Vice-Chair of the Backbench Business Committee did say at Business Questions today that their calendar is now pretty crowded. But I think the member has done us, nevertheless, a service to the House by securing this debate, and I wish him and all those who are celebrating a happy, joyful and blessed Easter when it comes.
Shadow Minister Liz Twist.
Thank you, Dr Huck. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship in this debate, and I thank the Honourable Member for Don Valley for securing this debate on Easter, Christian culture and heritage. Now, I'd like to just talk a little bit about the contributions from other members at this stage, which I think have been very interesting. So the member for Don Valley talked about his faith and about the influence of Christianity on the country, and it is good to see that he is reflecting that view and proud to speak of his faith as well. Turning to the Honourable Member from Gainsborough, the member talked about Christianity being at the heart of our culture and talked about his own religious background, but also talked of the strength of the Church of England as well here. And the Honourable Member for Romford talked about heritage and culture derived from our Christian faith, those other elements of the debate, and told the story about the hot cross buns. And I am certainly, Dr Huck, very glad that we're still able to have hot cross buns in this place and indeed in many other places. And talked, of course, about Westminster Abbey just across the road from us and its importance and significance in our history and culture. So this weekend, Dr Huck, my constituents will be getting together, attending services and taking part in Easter egg hunts, albeit that Easter eggs are maybe one of those things that we've adopted rather than coming from a Christian background. So Easter egg hunts like the one in Crawcrook Park in my constituency, which is always a highlight with the children. And let's hope that this year we have enough Easter eggs for all of the children who come out, because it was very popular. For churchgoers and non-churchgoers alike, it's a reminder that Christianity has shaped many of our traditions. Now, I would like to take this opportunity to pay tribute to one of my local vicars, Father Barry, at the Church of St Mary the Virgin in Wickham, a church built between the 12th and the 14th century with a long tradition and a great history. And Father Barry has been a real part of the community for many years there, working with different people. And I pay tribute to all of his work and looking forward to celebrating with him his years in Wickham. I'd also like to talk about some of the other heritage assets in my constituency. For example, in my own area, the Church of the Holy Cross, started in 1220, which is a real asset to our community and very much valued. And also to mention one of the earliest Catholic churches in our constituency, the Church of St Mary and St Thomas Aquinas in Stella, the Catholic Church. And I was very proud to be a governor at the church associated with the parish. Very pleased to play that part. I particularly want to pay tribute to Churches Together in Blaydon, who work absolutely tirelessly across denominations to serve our local community. I know their community larder and other support that they provide really has supported many families in desperate need. As we speak, of course, we remain in Lent, and Lent is marked by various customs, including prayer, fasting and almsgiving. And each year pupils at St Thomas More Catholic School in my constituency take part in Lenten Alms with 6 weeks of fundraising for local charities. Proceeds this year will be going to local charity Daft as a Brush, which looks after transport for people being treated for cancer. And I thank all the staff and students for their work during that period. Like many other faiths, Christianity has a proud tradition of charity, and such charity is an important aspect of our Christian heritage. And to give just a few examples, I think of Joseph Rowntree, the Quaker businessman and social reformer who sought to tackle the root causes of poverty endemic in early 20th century Britain. And the Joseph Rowntree Foundation's social research continues to inform policy work to this day. Meanwhile, organisations such as Christians Against Poverty and Christian Aid, among others, are a lifeline for those facing acute hardship, both here in the UK and around the world. I pay tribute also to the Trussell Trust, who support more than 1,200 food bank centres across the UK. The food bank model spread rapidly through church networks, and as the organisations say, they were inspired by Matthew chapter 25, verses 35 to 36. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was in prison, and you visited me. It's a reminder of the obligations we have to the most vulnerable people in our society. It's great that they do this, but their vision, as they say, is for a UK without food banks because they're unnecessary, and I cannot but agree with them in that mission. Now, charities in the UK have carried many families through the cost of living crisis, where this government hasn't provided the help that they need. Many of them are being hard hit by this increase in demand. Many of the charities, that is, are hard hit by the increase in demand, with some even having to turn people away. The National Council for Voluntary Organisations has called this a cost of giving crisis. And this Easter, I hope the government will take steps to recognise and support their essential contribution. Now, as a Labour MP, I could not go without recognising the role of Christianity within the history of our party and our trade union movement. Our founder, Keir Hardie, was a Methodist preacher, and many other early figures in the movement cited their faith as having inspired their passion for the principles of cooperation and solidarity. Of course, Christianity has inspired many diverse political movements, and in turn, the values of the Labour movement are by no means exclusively Christian. Our movement and our society are all the better for the contributions made by countless faiths, cultures and denominations, often working across faith boundaries. The compassion of these communities was vital for getting many of us through the COVID-19 pandemic. To this day, as the cost of living crisis continues, many churches, mosques, synagogues, gurdwaras, mandirs and temples have been right at the front line, opening their doors beyond their own immediate communities to those in desperate need. And as we've seen threats to community cohesion in recent months, it's been inspiring to see faith communities bringing people together. Such interfaith dialogue is vital not only for resolving differences, but for building the strong and collaborative communities that can support people in times of need. The government has a role to play in facilitating such cooperation, and I know members across this House are concerned about the impact of the closure of the interfaith network on that community cohesion work. And I hope the Minister is working to ensure multi-faith dialogue is now facilitated through other means as well. This Easter, we must also remember those who will be observing it in the most desperate of circumstances. Those facing destitution, fleeing persecution, or sheltering from the violence of war. Since the outbreak of the war in Gaza, the Holy Family Catholic Church has been a source of refuge for hundreds of displaced Palestinians. In December, an innocent mother and daughter were killed within its grounds, and many others continue to suffer without water or food. I hope that this Easter, the Minister will join me in recognising our shared humanity and in a call for peace. As we look towards Holy Week, I pay tribute to people of all faiths and those of no faiths at all who strive daily to serve their communities, both here in the UK and overseas. I celebrate the Christian churches and charities in my own community and the rich contribution that they have made and continue to make to our society. The government should rightly recognise this contribution, but must also reflect on the hardship that has made some of those contributions necessary. Finally, I hope that members here today and across the House have a very happy and peaceful Easter.
Minister Felicity Buchan.
Thank you, and it is a pleasure, Dr. Huck, to serve under your chairmanship, being a fellow London MP. Can I start by congratulating the Honourable Member for Don Valley for securing this very important debate? And can I say that I thought his speech was deeply thoughtful, very eloquent, and also humorous, which is quite a difficult combination to get together. And the strength of his faith came across very clearly. Can I also thank the Honourable Member for Gainsborough for his very considered and impassioned speech. I was in particular struck by your remarks on freedom of speech and religion, and I know that you are a man of strong faith. We always see each other in the summer at the Brompton Oratory in my constituency's annual summer fete. And I know that you went to a very, very good faith school in my constituency, St Philip's. And can I also thank the member for Romford for his very important contribution. I was struck by his comments on how intrinsic Christianity is to our culture and to our history, and also his comments on the importance of the Church of England. Can I thank the front benchers for their contributions? I found the contribution from the SNP's spokesman very interesting, in particular how close Christmas and Easter are to each other. And can I thank the shadow spokesperson? Just one point I would like to take up on your comments.
The clerk always gives me a funny look when people say you.
My apologies. Apologies.
Other people in this room who've sat in this
yes,
chair know exactly what I mean.
No, my mistake entirely.
Thank you.
The Honourable Member. The Honourable Member said that government had not given sufficient support to the cost of living. I would just like to put on the record that this government has given more than £100 billion of cost of living support. But let me go back to the subject in front of us, the importance of Christianity. I share the Honourable Member for Don Valley's convictions about the importance of faith as an essential pillar of our society. And I welcome this opportunity to celebrate the role that Christianity has played in shaping and nurturing the world that we live in. I agree that we should be immensely proud of Britain's history and culture. And government believes that people need to feel strong in their religious identities, and we are making sure that the voices of people of faith are being heard in government. Our country has been built on Christian values. They permeate every aspect of our lives. Values such as respect for others, public service, and the regard for the rule of law are supported by the overwhelming majority of people in this country. These values have evolved over time to become an integral part of life in Britain today. For this, we all owe a debt of gratitude to the Church of England and the Church of Scotland, the two established churches in the UK. The church has, from the first, been the bedrock for our Christian community. It underpins the spiritual well-being of individuals. The church welcomes each of them into a sustaining community of faith, and it builds around them the cultural and institutional frameworks that promotes and protects their well-being. These values are not unique to these churches and their worshippers. They characterize the core beliefs of all of our faith communities. And it has been mentioned that at this important time of the year, many religions are celebrating important events. We are clearly in the holy month of Ramadan, and I was privileged to attend an iftar at Al-Manar Mosque in my constituency last night. And clearly Passover is coming in late April, and I will be visiting a synagogue in my constituency at the weekend. Each of our religions, through the commitment they make to serve their worshippers and in their efforts to build our society, help to deepen and enrich the lives of all of us. At Easter time, we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ. The resurrection signifies the promise of redemption and rebirth and the forgiveness of sin. So as Easter approaches, I am grateful for this opportunity to celebrate the role of the Christian church in our history and culture. I am proud of the United Kingdom as a place where people are free to practice their religion, faith, or belief. We should all celebrate the diversity and richness of a society that has welcomed and supported those of all faiths and backgrounds. The latest census tells that the proportion number of Christians living in this country has decreased. However, Christianity remains the most prominent religion. We may think of ourselves as an increasingly secular state, but the imprint and influence of Christianity on every aspect of our lives is unmistakable. It is expressed in the very fabric of our buildings, our great churches and cathedrals, the hall that we stand in today. It shapes the defining landmarks of our calendar: Easter, Christmas, Saints' Days, and Holy Days. It defines our working week, setting aside one day of each week to rest and worship. And it has long inspired our artists, composers, writers, and poets whose work enlightens and sustains our lives. Christianity has shaped this country's history, and we should take this opportunity to celebrate the impact that those inspired by its teachings have had on the work of our Parliament. It was the Christian faith of the likes of William Wilberforce and John Wesley which led to the abolition of slavery. Elizabeth Fry devoted herself to the cause of prison reform. Lord Shaftesbury promoted care for people with mental illnesses. Charles Dickens, driven by his faith to work for a better, fairer world, called his Lodging House Act the best piece of legislation that ever proceeded from this Parliament. Florence Nightingale, Charles Spurgeon, Harold Moody, Octavia Hill, committed reformers inspired by their Christian faiths to drive reform and improve the lives of all. Faith and belief continue to motivate people to acts of public service and to serve their local communities. As a nation, we continue to be made stronger by the work of those inspired by their faith. The tireless work goes on every day in our communities, up and down the country, often without fanfare or fuss, quietly undertaken by those making an essential contribution to the common good. It is right that we celebrate and show our gratitude for this work and ensure that the perspectives and voices of faith and belief are heard by government. Churches are often centres of community support, providing a range of services, including after-school care, youth clubs, financial advice, and addiction support, to name a few. They often provide a safety net for those in need, running food banks or warm hubs. And the pastoral impact of the church extends further into our society, with the provision of chaplaincy across the public sector, including Church of England schools, which we have addressed, prisons, hospitals, and the armed forces. Church faith schools, like all other faith schools, also play an important role in our education system, providing high-quality school places for many children from all backgrounds and choice for parents. Faith schools are some of our highest performing schools and are often popular with parents, whether they belong to the faith or not.
Well, my friend and I,
yes.
Precisely that point. I don't expect you to give an answer now, but I've had various meetings. We've had meetings with the Secretary of State for Education, and I know the decision is now in Downing Street. There's been a long campaign to abolish the so-called faith cap, which serves no purpose apart from limiting the ability of Catholic schools' academies to attract new pupils. So I don't expect her to answer now, but can she promise to raise this matter with Downing Street and with the Secretary of State for Education, who I know believes a faith cap should be removed?
Minister. Thank you for that intervention, and I will certainly follow up and revert to you. I just want to mention a few faith schools in my constituency. I have many, but just to mention one, St Mary Abbott's Primary School, which has hosted many Afghan and Ukrainian children and made them so much so part of the school community, and Cardinal Vaughan, which is an exceptional Catholic secondary school. Let me say again that as a government, we recognise the importance of faith and belief across our communities. My colleague Baroness Scott in the other place, the Minister for Social Housing and Faith, continues to champion the brilliant work carried out by our faith and belief communities up and down the country. As you know, we publish, as honourable members will know, we published Colin Bloom's independent review of faith engagement in April 2023. In his review, he examines engagement with faith in a broad range of public settings. He makes a number of recommendations on how government can improve engagement with faith groups, both in terms of recognising the contribution of faith communities to our society and in relation to addressing harmful practices. We are carefully considering the findings of the review and will respond in due course. I want to pick up on a few points that were mentioned. Religious tolerance was mentioned, and I want to make very, very clear that freedom of speech, freedom of worship, democracy, the rule of law, and equal rights are things that we all strive for and value. The rights that we enjoy in the UK extend to everyone. Any individual or group is free to express views and beliefs within the confines of the law, but we must all behave responsibly and respect one another's fundamental rights. Freedom of religion or belief is a fundamental human right and one which underpins so many other rights. It was brought up funding for places of worship. I just want to be very transparent that funding for places of worship is relatively limited. Successive governments have followed the principle that it is for faith communities themselves to be responsible for the management and upkeep of the places of worship. But nevertheless, there are some instances of government support. For example, there is the Heritage Fund run by the National Lottery, which is a scheme to help restore buildings so that they can be enjoyed by the wider community. If a place of worship is listed, there is a further scheme called the Listed Places of Worship Grant Scheme run by DCMS. and under the recent Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, local authorities can now pay small amounts of money for repair and maintenance of local churches where their buildings are being used to deliver services to the wider community. I also want to talk briefly about the interfaith network. I did take an urgent question on this a couple of weeks ago. I want to make very, very clear that we value the contribution made by all organisations dedicated to bringing our faith communities together in order to strengthen the ties that bind us. And in my own constituency,
yes. It's a 3-hour slot, so I think we'll be fine while they're
yes, absolutely. In my own constituency, I bring together the leaders of many different faith groups. So I bring together Holland Park Synagogue with Almanar Mosque, with the Gurdwara in my constituency, and with many Christian churches. So valuing interfaith networking is very important.
Thank you. Thank the Minister for giving way briefly. Just want to thank her for her welcome to her constituency, I think 3 years ago, when I visited, I think it was All Saints Notting Hill.
That's correct.
For the unveiling of the Royal Coat of Arms in that wonderful church in the Minister's constituency. And would she agree with me that it's magnificent that a church displays the Royal Coat of Arms and that all churches should be encouraged to do the same? And will she join me in congratulating the Reverend Father David Ackerman of St John's, Kensal Green, where they not only display the Royal Coat of Arms, but they raised £20,000 for Platinum Jubilee windows, magnificent stained glass windows that depict the flowers and the flora and fauna from all over the Commonwealth. I think it's a unique tribute to Her late Majesty for the Platinum Jubilee. And would she perhaps visit the church to see how wonderful that looks and what a great testimony to our Christian faith, but also the importance of the monarchy and the Commonwealth as part of that Christian heritage that we celebrate today?
Thank you. I would certainly agree with everything that you have said of the importance and the unity of the church, the state, and of the royal family. And it was a great delight to see you in my constituency.
Minister, the clerk is nudging me by the elbow. The word "you" means me in this context.
Absolutely, and it was a great delight to see the honourable member in my constituency, and I'd love to see him again in my constituency. So just on the interfaith network, the department monitors all funded organisations throughout the life cycle of their project for the purposes of assessing delivery against work plan targets, compliance and evaluation in line with best practice for the management of public funding. To ensure suitability, all partners are subject to clearance through our internal finance and due diligence processes. The Secretary of State made the decision to withdraw the offer of funding to the interfaith network in view of a member of the Muslim Council of Britain being appointed to the IFN's Board of Trustees. Successive governments have had a long-standing policy of non-engagement with the MCB. The potential closure of the interfaith network is a matter for the IFN as an independent charity, and it is not for government. So let me sum up. I would like to express my gratitude to those driven by their faith to strengthen our society and communities. Their selflessness, dedication, and commitment to helping others during these challenging times are so commendable. Religion plays a significant role in the lives of many people, and the government is committed to ensuring that it can continue to play a positive role in society. By working together, I know we can achieve even more to help our communities. Easter is the very foundation of the Christian faith. For Christians worldwide, the importance of Easter is praising and acknowledging Jesus Christ's resurrection, his triumph over sin and death, and the promise of everlasting life. As we hear in the Gospel of John 3:16 that my honourable friend has quoted, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life." And I remember having to recite that in my Sunday school in Fraserburgh in Aberdeenshire as a young girl. Easter is also a time we can all learn from Christians coming together, and a time we can all share with loved ones in unison. I wish my honourable friend and everyone who has taken part in this very timely debate a happy Easter.
To wind up, but not until 4:30, a couple of minutes on the screen. Nick Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair, and it has been a pleasure to serve under you today. I would also just like to say thank you to the Minister. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I do think she is a really lovely lady, and I was really pleased that she was actually in her place as well. And thank you so much for winding up. And I know it's a Thursday and people want to get home, but I do appreciate it. I'd also like to thank the member from Gainsborough, Romford, and Aberconway for their contributions and interventions, and for the member from the SNP too, and also to the Shadow Minister. It is great to hear what's been going off in her constituency and the different people of faith that she's mentioned. I've got a few people to mention myself. I believe all of us get brought to faith through the people that are around us, and the people that bring us to faith are so important. And the person that really brought me to faith was my dad. He's a fantastic fella. He's 82. He's still out there spreading the good news, and is a wonderful man. So my thanks obviously go to him. I also want to thank my pastor, Pastor Grayson Jones. When you become a Christian, and anyone can do this at any time, they've just actually got to repent from their sins and ask Christ to come into their life. But it's nice to do this, and I think it's important that you actually do this with somebody. And this is what happened between my pastor and myself, probably some 15 years ago now. And he's a wonderful fella. We've got a fantastic church, and his heart is for the Lord and for young people too. And the message is being spread across Doncaster like wildfire, which is wonderful. Is wonderful to see. I also want to thank the APPG for Christians in Parliament. They help me so much. And there are Bible studies on a Tuesday and a Wednesday. And if anyone wants to know about them, please do let me know. And Simon Calvert from the Christian Institute. The Christian Institute are a fantastic organisation, and they help me so much on a daily and a weekly basis. And I know they've helped lots of the members in this place. My thoughts at the moment do go to the Christian Institute, because their director sadly passed away, a man called Colin Hart. And I know he was a wonderful fellow, and my thoughts and prayers go to all at the Christian Institute and to all of his family too. Easter is an extra special time, as we know, and we have heard. But I genuinely believe that a life in Christ is the most wonderful thing. And although Christmas and Easter shine a light on the Christian faith, I believe God is with me all the time, and he helps me. And I don't believe I'm ever alone because of my faith. And I know we've got so many lonely people out there, and I think it's our duty as Christians to go and see these people and let them know what a faith in Christ can do for them and do for society as a whole. So please, if anyone wants to know more about Christ, then come and knock on my door. I'd love to tell as many people as possible about it. I'll just finish by saying thank you to the Chair, thank you to the clerks, and thank you for everyone for attending today on a Thursday afternoon. Thank you very much, and a happy Easter.
The question is that this House has considered Easter Christian culture and heritage. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Order. Sitting adjourned.
The proceeding has ended. 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 The proceeding has ended.